First thing I noticed was my daughter's hands. She couldn't keep them still. They moved from her lap to the tablecloth to the stem of her wineglass, never resting, never landing. That's how the evening began. My daughter sitting across from me at her in-laws' dining table in Gatineau, fingers trembling against the linen like she was counting down to something I couldn't see. I'm 63 years old, and I raised that girl alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Hull. I know her hands. I know what they do, and she's lying about being fine. And that night, they were screaming. Her husband, Julian, carved the roast with a slow precision that felt rehearsed. His father, Bernard Thibodeau, sat at the head of the table watching my daughter the way a man watches a stock ticker, calculating, patient, waiting for the right number. His wife, Estelle, poured herself more Chateau des Charmes without offering anyone else a glass. Their younger son, Antoine, scrolled his phone under the table and didn't bother hiding it. My daughter leaned toward me, her elbow brushed mine. Under the table, her hand found my wrist and squeezed hard enough to leave marks. "Mammon," she whispered. Her lips barely moved. "Whatever happens in the next 5 minutes, just say yes." My chest locked. I opened my mouth, but she shook her head, a tiny, violent motion, and pressed her phone into my palm beneath the napkin. The screen was warm. I could feel it buzzing against my skin. Notification after notification. "Renee," I breathed. "What are you doing?" She didn't answer. Her eyes were wet, glassy, locked on the candle in the center of the table as though staring at it hard enough might stop everything around her from moving. Bernard set down his fork. "Julian tells me you've been looking at property in Mont-Tremblant, Renee. Ambitious." My daughter smiled. It was the worst smile I'd ever seen on her face. Thin, cracked, held together by something that wasn't joy. "Just browsing," she said. Estelle made a sound, a short, clipped laugh that carried no warmth. Browsing costs nothing. Buying costs everything. The table went quiet. Antoine glanced up from his phone. Julian stopped carving. Bernard adjusted his napkin with the calm deliberation of a man who had already decided the next 3 moves. Then my daughter stood. Her chair scraped back hard enough to rattle the glasses. She pressed her palm to her stomach and forced a thin breath. "I need some air." Long day. Nobody moved to follow her. Nobody asked if she was all right. She bent down, kissed the top of my head, and whispered against my hair, "I love you. Please don't lose that phone." She walked out. The front door clicked shut behind her. And that sound, that soft, ordinary click, became the last sound my daughter ever made in that house. If you're listening right now, let me know where you're watching from, because what happened next changed everything. I drove home with her phone buried in my purse. I didn't look at it. I didn't understand what she'd done, and the not knowing sat in my stomach like a stone. The highway between Gatineau and my apartment in Hull felt longer than it ever had. Every red light pressed against my patience like a hand on my chest. When I got inside, I called her cell. Then I remembered. Her cell was in my purse. I called the house in Gatineau instead. It rang 6 times. Julian picked up. "She left about 20 minutes after you," he said. His voice was flat, polished, like a man reading from a card. "She said she was going for a drive. You know how she gets." I didn't like how he said that. "You know how she gets." As if my daughter's fear was a character flaw, I called her office number. No answer. I called her best friend in Ottawa. She hadn't heard from her. I texted the phone in my purse, her phone, out of sheer desperation, as if somehow the message would find her anyway. Hours crawled past. I sat at my kitchen table watching the clock on the microwave. Blink from 11:47 to 12,003 to 1:15. The apartment was too quiet. The fridge hummed. A siren passed somewhere far off. I kept seeing her hands, the way they wouldn't stop moving, the way she squeezed my wrist like she was trying to transfer something through skin. At 4:22 in the morning, my phone rang. not her number. A 6113 area code I didn't recognize. This is the Sûreté de Quebec. Are you the mother of Renee Thibodeau? I don't remember what I said. I think I said yes. I think I said it more than once. Your daughter was found unresponsive in her vehicle, carbon monoxide. The car was running inside a closed garage at a property on Chemin de Lac. I'm very sorry. The drive to the scene took 40 minutes. I don't remember most of it. I remember the windshield wipers moving even though it wasn't raining, because my hands needed something to do and I'd hit the wrong lever. I remember pulling up behind two SQ cruisers, their lights painting the trees blue and red and blue again. The property was a rental cottage on a quiet road near Wakefield. My daughter had no reason to be there. An officer approached before I reached the driveway. Young, careful, trained to manage grief. Ma'am, we're still processing the scene. Please wait here. I kept walking. I'm her mother. He hesitated. That word, mother, carved a space in the protocol just wide enough for me to pass through. Then I saw them. Julian stood near the ambulance, arms crossed, face arranged into an expression that looked like sorrow, the way a mannequin looks like a person. Bernard Thibodeau stood beside him, one hand resting on his son's shoulder, the other holding a coffee from a Tim Hortons cup. A coffee. At a death scene. His daughter-in-law's death scene. Estelle wasn't there. Antoine leaned against the rental cottage's porch railing, typing on his phone. Julian saw me and moved forward with rehearsed sympathy. It was an accident, he said. She must have fallen asleep with the engine running. She'd been stressed. You know how she... Don't, I said. My voice came out so low it barely existed. Don't finish that sentence. Bernard stepped in smoothly, the way men do when they want to redirect a room. We're all devastated. Let the officers handle things. You should go home. Rest. Rest. My daughter was on a stretcher 20 meters from where he stood, holding a double-double, and he wanted me to rest. An officer nearby repeated the official line. Carbon monoxide buildup. Unfortunately common in enclosed garages. No signs of foul play. I watched them, Bernard, Julian, Antoine, standing in a loose triangle, exchanging glances I wasn't meant to catch. Then Antoine muttered something to his father. Low, hurried, meant only for family. At least she signed the amendments before all this. My hearing sharpened the way it does when your body decides something matters more than breathing. Sign what? What amendments? Bernard gripped Antoine's arm, a quick corrective squeeze. Antoine's mouth shut. I looked at the garage. Closed door, sealed tight. My daughter's Subaru inside with the engine cold now. She hated that car in enclosed spaces. She'd told me once she felt claustrophobic even in underground parking. She would never sit inside a running car in a closed garage. The coroner's van arrived. They wheeled the stretcher past me, the white sheet, her shape beneath it. Small, still, impossibly final. I pressed my hand against my mouth and held the sound inside because these people did not deserve to witness what was breaking in me. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I looked down through blurred vision. TD Bank notification. Incoming transfer. $6,200,000. $6,200,000. Her entire RRSP, her business account, her investment portfolio, everything she'd built since launching her consulting firm in Ottawa. Transferred to me. Time stamped 7:43 p.m. During that dinner, while her hands trembled and her phone buzzed against my palm. The funeral was on a Wednesday. Gray sky, light snow, the kind of November morning that makes Ottawa look like it's mourning with you. I stood at the front of the chapel and watched the Thibodeaus arrive late, together, coordinated. Julian wore a new suit. Bernard nodded at acquaintances like he was attending a fundraiser. Estelle carried a single white lily and placed it on the casket with a gesture so practiced it looked choreographed. Nobody from their family cried. Not once. 3 days later, they came to my apartment. Not with flowers, not with casseroles, with a lawyer. The knock was hard, professional. The kind of knock that expects the door to open immediately. I looked through the peephole. Bernard Thibodeau, Estelle, and a man in a charcoal overcoat carrying a leather briefcase. Julian wasn't with them. That detail registered somewhere deep. I opened the door. Bernard walked in without being invited. His shoes tracked salt across my hallway floor. Estelle followed, scanning my apartment the way someone appraises a listing they'll never bid on. The lawyer entered last, already unbuttoning his coat. They sat down at my kitchen table, the one where Renee used to do her homework, without asking. "We need to discuss the estate," Bernard said. No preamble, no "how are you holding up?" Just business. The lawyer opened his briefcase. Under Quebec's matrimonial regime, your daughter's assets form part of the family patrimony. As her surviving spouse, Julian is entitled to an equal partition. Any transfers made outside this framework in the days before her death need to be reviewed and potentially reversed. The word reversed landed in the room like something dropped from height. Estelle added softly, "We don't want this to become complicated." Renee would have wanted things handled smoothly. Don't say her name, I thought. Don't you dare use her name as a tool. Bernard leaned forward. We're aware she made financial movements shortly before the accident. We need full transparency. Account numbers, transfer records, passwords. I look at him. Really looked. His eyes weren't grieving. They were inventorying. Scanning me for weakness, for confusion, for the kind of elderly fragility they assumed would make me compliant. I said nothing. The silence unsettled them faster than any argument could have. "We're trying to help you," Estelle said, her voice thin with impatience disguised as concern. "You're not equipped to manage this kind of money." I folded my hands in my lap and let the quiet press against them like a wall. The lawyer tapped his pen. "Mrs. Cooperation now prevents litigation later." Bernard exhaled sharply. "If you refuse to engage, we'll pursue this through the Superior Court. The Code Civil is clear." Still, I said nothing. Estelle shifted in her chair. Bernard's jaw tightened. The lawyer closed his folder and stood. "We'll be in touch," he said. It sounded like a threat because it was one. They left salt prints on my floor and the smell of Estelle's perfume in my kitchen. I locked the door behind them and sat down at the table where their arrogance still hung in the air. Then I reached for my daughter's phone. I'd avoided it for 3 days. It felt like opening a wound. But my daughter had put that phone in my hand for a reason, and the reason wasn't sentiment. The lock screen was her thumbprint, but she'd set up Face ID for me months earlier. "Just in case," she'd said. I hadn't asked in case of what. I should have. The phone opened. Her notes app was on the screen, pinned to the top. A file titled, "For Maman, Read Everything." My throat closed. I tapped it. The entries were short, dated, written in the clip style of someone documenting something she didn't fully want to name yet. March 14, to Bernard, asked again how my business is structured. Wanted to know about the holding company. Why does he care? March 21. Julian brought home a family estate planning document. Didn't explain it. Left it on the nightstand like it was normal. April 2nd. Found out they changed the beneficiary on my life insurance without telling me. Called Desjardins. They confirmed Julian requested the change. I never signed anything. April 9th, she asked for my CRA login. Said it was for our taxes. We file separately. Why does she need my access? April 15, Bernard keeps mentioning what would happen to the business if something changed. What does that mean? Page after page. Weeks of quiet observation. My daughter hadn't written accusations. She'd written questions, the kind of questions a careful, intelligent woman asks when she senses the ground shifting beneath her but doesn't want to believe it. I read every entry twice. The pattern was unmistakable. Financial questions escalating in frequency. Insurance changes she didn't authorize. Documents appearing for signature without explanation. Pressure wrapped in family language, estate planning, family protection, shared security. Then I reached the last entry, dated the night of the dinner. The typing was rushed, full of autocorrect errors she hadn't fixed. Transferring everything to Mayman tonight. All accounts. They want me to sign the amendment tomorrow, and I can't stall anymore. If something happens to me, Mayman, the amendment is in the filing cabinet at the office. Don't sign anything they bring you. Call Mr. Fenton. He's the only lawyer I trust. Below that, one more line. I love you. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was trying to handle it myself. I held the phone against my chest until the screen went dark. The apartment felt like it was breathing around me, slow and heavy, waiting for me to decide what to do next. In the morning, I called Mr. Fenton. His office was on Elgin Street, second floor above a shawarma shop. He was younger than I expected, early 40s, steady eyes, the kind of lawyer who listens with his whole body. He'd handled Renee's business incorporation 3 years ago. He knew her. When I told him she was gone, he closed his eyes for a long moment before speaking. She called me 2 weeks ago, he said quietly. Asked me to review a document her husband's family wanted her to sign. A spousal mandate in case of incapacity. But the terms were unusual. It gave Julian full control over all her assets, her business, her RRSP, everything. Effective immediately upon signing. Did she sign it? No. He paused. But she told me they were pressuring her, hard. I placed her phone on his desk and showed him the notes. He read in silence, scrolling slowly, his expression tightening with every entry. Then I handed him something else. A printout I'd found that morning in the filing cabinet at her office in Ottawa, exactly where she said it would be. The amendment. Unsigned, but with her name pre-printed on the signature line. And beside it, a second copy, this one signed, but the handwriting wasn't hers. Someone had forged her signature. Clean, confident, wrong. Fenton held the 2 copies side by side, his mouth pressed into a thin line. This isn't estate planning, he said. This is asset extraction. They were building a legal framework to take everything she owned, and they needed her signature, or something that looked like it, to finalize the transfer. He set the papers down and looked at me directly. The insurance changes, the forged signature, the pressure timeline in her notes. This isn't a family dispute. This is fraud, potentially worse. He didn't say the word. He didn't need to. That afternoon, I drove to my daughter's neighborhood in Aylmer. Her house was quiet. Julian's car wasn't in the driveway. I wasn't there for him. Mrs. Olet, the neighbor across the street, was sweeping her porch despite the cold. She'd lived there longer than anyone on the block. She saw everything and said nothing unless someone asked. I asked. She set the broom against the railing and looked at me with eyes that had been waiting for this conversation. The night before it happened, she said slowly, your daughter was outside, late, past 11. She was sitting in her car in the driveway with the interior light on, reading something. Papers. She looked upset. My chest ached. Was she alone? Mrs. Oled hesitated. At first, yes. Then a car pulled up. Dark SUV. Bernard's car. I know it because he parks it sideways and blocks half the street every time he visits. He got out, went inside the house, stayed maybe 40 minutes. When he left, Renee's car was still in the driveway, but the light was off. She paused. I almost went over to check on her. I wish I had. I touched her arm. You didn't do anything wrong. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. There's one more thing. When the ambulance came the next day after they found her at that cottage, Antoine was here, at the house, before the police even called anyone. He was carrying a box out of the garage. I saw him put it in his trunk. I asked her if she'd be willing to write that down. She went inside and came back with a signed statement, handwritten on lined paper, dated and witnessed by her husband. The meeting invitation arrived by text the following Monday. Bernard Thibodeau, direct and commanding as always. Family meeting, 2 p.m. Saturday. Our house. Attorney present. Non-negotiable. Non-negotiable. As if I answered to him, as if grief made me small enough to fit inside his plans. I showed the text to Fenton. He wanted to come with me. I told him no, not inside, but I asked him to wait in his car down the street. I asked him to have everything ready to file if things went the way I expected them to. At 1:58 p.m. on Saturday, I walked into the Thibodeau house in Gatineau. The living room had been arranged like a boardroom. Chairs in a semicircle. Bernard at the center, legs crossed, cufflinks catching the light, Estelle beside him, tapping her nails against the armrest. Their lawyer at a side table with a folder and a Mont Blanc pen. Julian sat in the corner, pale, avoiding my eyes, and one chair, slightly lower than the rest, was left for me. I stayed standing. "You're late," Estelle said. I wasn't. I checked my watch as I walked in. 1:58. I didn't correct her. Correcting small lies wastes energy better spent on large ones. Bernard began immediately. "We've been more than patient. The financial matters surrounding Renee's estate must be resolved. Julien, as her husband, is entitled to his legal share under Quebec law. Any pre-death transfers made without spousal consent are contestable." The lawyer nodded. "We'll need full disclosure. Every account, every transfer, every movement of funds in the 48 hours before her passing." 48 hours. The exact window of the dinner. The exact window of the transfer. "You're overwhelmed," Estelle said, softening her voice into something that sounded like concern but moved like manipulation. "Let us handle the complicated parts. You shouldn't have to deal with numbers at your age." At my age, as if 63 meant I couldn't read a bank statement, I let the silence build. It filled the spaces between their words. It made Bernard shift his weight. It made the lawyer tap his pen faster. It made Julien look at the floor. "She's not going to cooperate," Antoine muttered from the doorway. He'd appeared without announcement, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. "She thinks she's smarter than everyone in this room." I didn't respond to him either. Bernard tried again. "If you force us to litigate, you will lose. The law is clear. Matrimonial assets belong to both spouses." Estelle leaned forward. "Renee told Julien everything was meant to stay in the family. She promised. It's the same script. The same entitlement dressed as grief." I reached into my bag. The room contracted. I placed my daughter's phone on the table. Flat, deliberate, screen down. Then I placed the unsigned amendment beside it. Then the forged copy. Then Mrs. Allwood's handwritten statement. 4 items. 4 truths. Arranged in a line like cards being turned face up. Nobody spoke. I picked up the phone, unlocked it, and read the first entry aloud. My voice didn't shake. It had moved past shaking days ago. Bernard asked again how my business is structured. Wanted to know about the holding company. Why does he care? Estelle's face drained. Bernard straightened in his chair. I turned to the next entry. Found out they changed the beneficiary on my life insurance without telling me. Called Desjardins. They confirmed Julien requested the change. Julien's head snapped up. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. I kept reading. Entry after entry. The insurance changes she didn't authorize. The passwords they demanded. The document pressure. The questions about what would happen to her assets if something changed. Every sentence landed exactly where it needed to. Then I set the phone down and picked up the 2 copies of the amendment. I held them side by side so everyone could see. "This one," I said quietly, lifting the unsigned copy, "is the version my daughter refused to sign." I lifted the other. "And this one has her name on the signature line, but this isn't her handwriting. Someone forged it." The lawyer reached for the papers. His hand trembled. Bernard's jaw clenched so hard I could hear his teeth. I placed Mrs. Albolet's statement on the table last. "Your neighbor saw you at my daughter's house the night before she died, Bernard. Past 11, 40 minutes inside. And Antoine." I looked at him standing in the doorway, his arrogance crumbling in real time. "She saw you removing a box from the garage the morning after, before the police were even called." Antoine pushed off the door frame. "That's a lie. She's making." "Stop," Bernard hissed. But Estelle had already cracked. Her composure broke, the way ice breaks all at once, along lines that were always there. "We didn't mean for anything to," she started. "Enough!" Bernard slammed his palm on the table. The glasses rattled. The lawyer flinched. But Estelle's half-sentence hung in the air like smoke. It couldn't be unsaid. I read the final entry, the one dated the night of the dinner. My daughter's last words, typed in a rush while her hands trembled beneath a tablecloth in her in-laws' dining room, transferring everything to Mom and tonight. If something happens to me, call Mr. Fenton. I love you. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. The room stopped breathing. I lowered the phone gently and looked at them, one by one, with the steady calm of a woman who had crossed from mourning into clarity. You planned to take everything she built, I said softly, but she trusted me, and she was right to. Their lawyer closed his folder. His pen lay abandoned on the table. A line of sweat ran from his temple to his jaw. We need to end this meeting, he whispered. Not to me, to them. I gathered everything, the phone, the documents, the statement, and placed them back in my bag. I walked out of that house at the same pace I'd entered, steady, unhurried, holding my daughter's truth the way she must have held her fear. Fenton was waiting in his car. I got in and handed him the bag. File everything, I said. By Monday morning, he had assembled a team, a forensic accountant, an insurance fraud investigator, and a retired SQ sergeant who specialized in suspicious deaths. They reviewed every document, every timestamp, every entry in Renee's notes. The forged signature on the amendment was confirmed as fraudulent within hours. The insurance beneficiary changes were flagged by Desjardins' own compliance department. The financial trail matched my daughter's notes with surgical precision. The retired sergeant sat back in his chair after reviewing everything and said what I already knew, but needed someone with authority to confirm. This isn't a civil matter. This is financial fraud, forgery, and the circumstances of her death need to be reinvestigated. They crossed too many lines. Fenton drove the evidence to the Gatineau police himself. I followed. Detectives reviewed everything in a private room, the phone, the amendment, the forged signature, the neighbor statement, the insurance records. They asked measured questions. When did she write this? When did you find this? When did the neighbors see the vehicle? By late afternoon, officers were moving with purpose. Fenton placed his hand on my shoulder. You did everything right. I stepped outside. The November air bit my cheeks. The courthouse across the street sat heavy against the gray sky, its stone steps dusted with early snow. I stood there for a moment, letting the cold settle around me. I felt something then. Not peace, presence. My daughter, not in voice, not in shadow, just a warmth behind my ribs that hadn't been there the days before. I'm doing this for you, I whispered. Footsteps behind me, officers filing out toward unmarked vehicles. Fenton appeared beside me. They're executing warrants, he said. 2 hours later, I watched from across the street as SQ officers walked Bernard Thibodeau out of his own front door in handcuffs. His face held the shock of a man who had never once imagined consequences would find him. Estelle followed, also in cuffs, her white lily composure shattered completely. Antoine was taken separately, from the garage, the same garage Mrs. Olela had seen him leaving with that box. Julien was arrested at his office in downtown Ottawa the following morning. The weeks that followed were quiet in the way that follows a storm. The investigation deepened. Charges were laid. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and the RCMP opened a parallel investigation into the circumstances of my daughter's death. Court dates formed like stones being set into a wall. Lawyers circled the Thibodeau family the way they had once circled me. I didn't follow every headline. I didn't need to. Justice had its own momentum now. The money my daughter transferred, her life's work, built from a one-woman consulting practice she started in a shared office space on Sparks Street, didn't stay in my account. I couldn't let it sit there. It had arrived wrapped in fear, in urgency, in the last clear-headed decision she made while her hands trembled beneath the tablecloth. I met with advisors. I spoke with Fenton. I spoke with people who had turned grief into something that breathed. I established a foundation in her name, dedicated to women entrepreneurs in Quebec and Eastern Ontario. Women building businesses from scratch the way she had. Women who needed a push, not a trap. I named it after her first and middle names. No mention of how she died. No shadow. Just possibility. The morning it launched, I stood at the back of a small ceremony at the NAC in Ottawa and watched the first 3 recipients speak about their businesses. A woman from Vanier who designed accessible clothing, a software developer from Chelsea, a baker from Orléans expanding into her first storefront. Their excitement cracked something open in me. Not sorrow, something cleaner, something that felt like my daughter standing beside me, nodding. Later that week, I drove to the cemetery in Beechwood. The path to her headstone curved past a row of maples. Bare now, their branches sketched against the sky like handwriting. The ground was cold. A thin layer of frost clung to the grass. I knelt beside her stone and took out her phone. I'd kept it charged all this time, not because I needed it anymore, but because turning it off felt like closing a door I wasn't ready to close. I opened her notes one last time, scrolled past the entries about pressure and fear and insurance fraud, past the final desperate transfer, all the way to the very first entry she'd ever written, dated 2 years before any of this began. Had lunch with Maman today. She told me she's proud of what I'm building. I almost cried in the restaurant. I think she means it more than anyone ever has. I want to be the kind of woman she is, the kind who stays steady when everything shakes. I read it aloud, letting my voice drift into the cold air, letting her hear it again, letting myself hear it again. When I finished, I placed the phone gently on the grass beside her headstone. It rested there softly, screen dark, holding every truth she'd ever trusted me with. You gave me everything, I whispered. Every clue, every fear, every word you couldn't say out loud. And I carried it exactly the way you asked me to. A breeze moved through the bare maples, steady and cool, carrying the faint scent of frozen earth and something softer underneath. Something like the perfume she used to wear when she came over for Sunday dinner. The one that always lingered in my hallway long after she'd gone. I rested my hand on the stone that bore my daughter's name, and I let the warmth behind my ribs settle into something permanent, something I would carry for the rest of my life. Not grief, not anger, but the unshakable knowledge that she trusted me with her truth, and I protected it.